Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Watson is not able to be with us today. I think everybody else is here, so thank you for being here. I don't think we have announcements at the moment. Anybody have anything they need to announce? All right, so we'll just jump right in. We have two things on our agenda today. We're going to discuss our budget, and we're also going to discuss school capacity, how those determinations are made. So we will just jump right in. Mr. McPherson, are you going to take it away for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joe Snyder, our budget director, and Joni Joyce, our budget analyst, will be handling this presentation. They're really the brains and the brawn behind this, and I've said this before. I have tried to do that job before, and they took it to a higher level. So they do a fantastic job. And we're really fortunate to have them. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
And they really do a fantastic job. And I'll just brag on them for a moment. I believe it was at our work session last September, and some of you may have seen this. I know the board members have, but they presented us with how close they are in their estimates over time on our budget. And they were within, 1.5 percentage points for the last several years. So I think that you're quite right. They do a fantastic job of what to us appears like a guessing game, figuring out what kind of money we're going to have going forward. But to them, it's amazing that they come within that close. So thank you for your hard work, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, and thank you for those comments. And Ron does play a big role in this, despite his argument there. And I want to say this again. I do want to say this, too, about that presentation. I think I said this the last time we met. So, yes, we've been fortunate to be very close on actuals to budgeted, but a lot of that goes to our departments and the heads of those departments, and that's implementing their budgets with fidelity. So, and I think I said this last time, we didn't show that to pat ourselves on the back. It was more about bragging on the district itself. So that is a number we're proud of. So anyway, without saying anything else about that, we'll go ahead and jump into the presentation. I apologize to board members on the committee. This is going to be a rerun of our community budget meeting. And I told Ron yesterday, I'm tired of hearing myself talk, so I can imagine you guys are tired of hearing it as well. Just to give you a kind of an idea of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Knox County Schools budget in comparison to two things: historically, the last few years, and also to our peers across the state. A couple of data points on that. And then we're going to look at our projected revenues that are in the board-approved budget. And then look at a couple different, we've sliced the expenditures a couple different ways. One is kind of the high-level, all-encompassing salary benefit enhancements that are in this budget. And then Joni's going to talk about some of the departmental level initiatives that are a part of the budget. And we'll leave some time for questions at the end. And I'll say this as well: if you have any questions along the way about something I say, feel free to stop me. So this is the slide I'm talking about concerning an overview of the budget. Just want to point out, just if you look at the bar, the graph there, the couple of the ones that jump off the page at you are the fiscal year 23 and the current fiscal year in terms of how much larger they are than the last two historically, the 20 and 21. And if you're familiar with our budget, and most of you are, typical year-to-year growth is about 3 to 4%. In the last couple of years, we've realized larger growth than that, 7.6 in 22, which is the current year, and then projecting about a 9% growth between now and next year. And I'll say a couple things about, how does this compare to our districts across the state that are our peers? And when we say that, there are really 6 districts that we are a part of, and that would be just kind of working ourselves across the state from east to west: Hamilton, Metro, Nashville, Williamson, Rutherford, and Shelby. When you look at our budget, and I'm comparing current year's budget, not projected fiscal year 23, because I haven't seen all of their numbers just yet. But amongst those 6, we're the third largest in terms of budgets and general purpose. Also the third largest in terms of the number of students that we have. Both Metro and I believe Shelby County's budgets for the current fiscal year are over $1 billion. And so we're at 542 for the current year, so we're significantly behind them. And behind us, Hamilton, Rutherford, and Williamson all fall into the same, within 100 million or so of where we are there. So just to provide some context. Any questions on that one before we move on? So the next few slides, we look at the revenues that are in the projected budget. And so state revenue, and that's, of course, for the current year and for next year, is going to be through the BEP. And our typical year-over-year growth there has been about 4% for the last decade. And this number's in red because we're projecting, and we actually got our April estimate this week. And so 2% growth is about what we're going to see between now and next year. And really, and you're familiar with this as well, but the things that drive this growth are two things. One is how much new money the governor puts into the BEP each year. And then secondly, the number of students that each district has. And I circled that because you'll see there at the bottom, we have seen a bit of a dip in our ADM. If you look back at fiscal year 21, that our funding for fiscal year 21 was based on 59,000 and almost 600 students. If you compare that to our funding for the current year, our number there was 57,384 students. So about 2,000 or so students less. That's the first year in the last several that we saw a dip in the number of students that we have. And if you look at the next, the fiscal year 23 number, it has picked back up about 1,000, which is about 1.7% or so. So hopefully that progression continues because that is an important factor the state uses in allocating funds. And before I forget about the state portion, it's the single largest portion of our funding at the district level. It's about 45% of our current fiscal year funding. The next largest portion, and if you add both of these together, it comprises about 53% of our funding, and that's our local option sales taxes as well as our current property tax. The current year, or the typical year-over-year growth is about 4% for sales tax. And then you'll see the 25% number, which jumps off the page at you. I've said this in all the meetings we've done. This is a bit misleading. That doesn't represent 25% growth in our sales tax collections. That's just a budget-to-budget number. And so a lot of that was impacted. You go back a couple of years ago to the COVID year. We ended up under budgeted how much sales tax we thought we would collect that fiscal year, just based on what economists across the state and nation were saying at that time. And so really since then, we have seen strong growth in sales tax collections, but a lot of this significant year-to-year change you see here is due to us under budgeting that 1 year and kind of playing catch up.
Yeah, can I ask on the fiscal year 23 projected change for property tax? I noticed we've gone from 1% to 2%, and new builds, I mean, we're expecting enough new builds that'll increase that percentage by a percent, we think?
Yeah, so, and Ron, feel free to jump in if you have some thoughts on this as well. So what we typically do there is meet with Chris Caldwell and his team, and we analyze both of these categories. What does current year look like in terms of the trends? And so I believe that 2% number, I think it is a projection. We anticipate what's been happening to continue to happen, but it has been mainly due to, they're going to collect more this year than what we budgeted, and it's mainly due to new builds and the growth we see.
And I guess property tax, I'm assuming, is more reliable number than sales tax. Obviously, we're just at the whim of what people spend. I mean, is that kind of correct? I mean, property tax, we really can pretty much predict what we should be collecting.
It is.
And then sales tax, we just have to wait and see.
And so it's good in good years when sales tax is really good. I mean, the district really benefits from that. And I think you see an offsetting, the alternative side of that's what the county is seeing. Their budget is more dependent upon property taxes, which are not as dynamic as sales tax. So during strong sales tax growth, it's great for the district, but we've also seen years where it's not been great. And so during those times are a little tougher. But yes, to your point, property taxes are much more stable. Any other thoughts or questions on that? I mean, I was going to point out the property tax, but we just discussed that, and it's really all I was going to touch on that.
I'd like to go back to the previous slide. I know it's way too early. This new formula that's come out, have you checked into it? Because this $591 million we're going to have to match that in coming years.
Right.
And if it's formula that we get punished in Knox County, you know, I hate to say that three-letter word, but something will have to happen.
Yes, it's a good point. And a thought of mine was to touch on TISA a little bit. And so I'll give my few thoughts, and Ron, you may want to jump in here as well. What we see in the next couple of years, the numbers the state has provided, we see pretty significant growth just in state funds alone for fiscal year 24. And we're thinking maybe anywhere between 20 and 30% growth over what we currently have. So compare that to what we historically have seen, 4%. So 20 to 30% growth is going to be significant money for the district. But to your point, that along with that comes a maintenance of effort on the local level. I think when you look at the out years past fiscal year 24, so 25 through about 29, I think that was the years they provided to us. The year-to-year growth they show in state funds after next year are going to be 1.5% to 2%, and it's on a gradual decrease, which I do think will increase the local burden at that point. And Ron, if you want to add anything to that.
Oh, no, thanks, Joe. Yeah, Joe's right. When we take a look at that, initially, the dollars from TISA would appear to be very significant. The concern we have is the sustainability of it. So there is the local maintenance of effort requirement. I think, based on what I've seen, I think we're good there. And when I say we're good, I think the county's good. Because on the local requirement, it's already significantly, the county contributes significantly more than what is actually required through the BEP formula. So even though the amount of dollars would increase and the local requirement would increase, I think we're probably at a safe place to where there wouldn't be necessarily a burden by statutory burden, if I want to call it that, on the county. But the concern we have is, aside from that, is the increase in dollars do not appear to be even enough to cover inflationary growth. So I think that when those dollars would come, I think we have to be extremely strategic in how we spend and budget those dollars for the reasons you mentioned. Because, I think we're good from a I guess from the law standpoint. I think we're going to be fine. The issue is going to be, though, with regards to strategic budgeting, such that we don't overcommit when the sustainability may not be there. So we're going to have to tackle that for probably next budget year. So we're already looking at some of those dynamics.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions on TISA or BEP? Okay, so the third major category of revenue that we have on our revenue overview for the budget is related to federal programs. And it also has more interdepartmental / governmental type transfers. So there are a couple items here I want to point out that changed in that section. The federal programs, the district is allowed to charge indirect cost to any grant that's funded by the federal government. This $1.5 million was simply a reinstatement of what we charged the school nutrition fund to manage that grant each year. At the beginning of this current fiscal year, their reserve funds were not enough that we could charge that, and so we're just simply reinstating that amount. And then the local grant, that's made up of two different local initiatives that the mayor's office provides. One is the kindergarten intervention grant, which is a little bit over $1 million, and then the literacy initiative grant. That funding is reduced, but those items that we have in our expenditure budget are still in the general purpose budget and will continue. And that goes back to what we were talking earlier about property taxes. Just by virtue of their budget being more reliant on property tax, they're not seeing the large growth we are. So they asked if we could suspend that revenue item for the coming year, and we'll reevaluate that in fiscal year 24. But no services or positions are being reduced as a reduction of that grant.
Are they just reducing that grant, or we're doing away with that grant for next year?
So I leave it, I say suspending it for now. I think there's room for us to we always have that conversation with the mayor and with Chris each year. And Ron, you may know different. I haven't heard them say this is done for good.
And are there any other line items? Because, I mean, my understanding has been the reason we do it as grants is then it's not seen as maintenance of effort, continuing it and can be looked at year to year. Are there any others besides these two that are considered grants from the county?
Those are the only two.
Okay.
Is there Elevate, or is that?
Sorry,
is that
that's
one,
right.
maybe?
Yes, the Elevate
Okay.
grant, which is our high school for students that, what's the right word I'm looking for? Yes, drug
recovery.
addiction, drug recovery, thank you. So there's about $90,000 of a grant that was started for the current fiscal year that is still in next year's budget.
Yeah, and one thing, if I could interject too, the mayor, this administration has been absolutely fantastic as far as being an education supporter. So I know the mayor's completely in support of these initiatives. Something like this is not necessarily unusual. Like we have gone to the county before and asked for some relief on certain things through the years, right? And so when their reserves can maybe help us out, or we can, through the budget process, we have a really good relationship with the county, and so this is not necessarily unusual. I mean, the mayor is extremely supportive of what we do. But we recognize that, as the point's been made, property tax, while they are more stable than sales tax, they don't provide the growth in a good year like sales tax does. And so what we're very conscious of is that there may be a time when the economy's going not so well, right? And so then the county may step in and kind of help us through certain times like that. So just want to make that point too, that we just have a really good working relationship. And I think it's really healthy that both bodies can can work together to make sure that we do what's right with students and the citizens of Knox County. So anyway, just wanted to kind of put that in there.
Thank you. So when you add up the pluses and minuses we talked about there, it's about a $49.5 million increase, which is back to what we showed over there, about 9% over our current year budgeted revenues. So I want to pivot now and look at some expenditures in the budget. The next couple of slides, we're looking at compensation benefit type enhancements as well as additional positions that are in this budget. Before I get into the line by line here, I do want to mention the budget survey we did this year, as well as the strategic plan. If you look at the top, those are the items that we use every year to help build the budget. But you'll see as we talk through some of these, it ties directly back, especially to the strategic plan and also the survey we did. The highest responses we got on the survey this year from the community, and there were about 4,500 responses, was they value hiring and retaining quality teachers and also paying our teachers well. And then the third thing beneath those two was classroom sizes. They want to maintain our current classroom sizes where possible. So I think you'll see as we talk through some of these items that touch all three of those. So the first one you see is just a salary schedule step increase for eligible personnel, and that means anyone who's not currently topped out on the schedule gets a step increase. Depending on the schedule and where they are on it, that can be anywhere from 1 to almost 2% increase year to year. And that is a part of this recommended budget. The second item there is a 4% increase, base salary schedule increase for all certified and classified salary schedules. And then you'll see the third item, this is the second year in a row that the superintendent and board had made what I call a targeted approach to 3 specific salary schedules, which are our educational assistants, school clerical, and our custodial positions. And those, if you think about those, 2 things we come to mind. One is they're typically on our lower end of the wage scale, so they need some attention. So that's why we've done 8% for 2 years in a row. But then the second part of that too is just vacancies. The last couple of years we've ran probably 70 to 80 vacancies custodial year-round, and the same with educational assistants. So there are positions that are in the budget, but we just can't fill them because we can't find people to work those jobs.
And to that point, I think, can you talk, one of you talk about, we are going to do the
Salary schedule
Yes,
study.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and so that's a good point. So we do have in the budget $300,000 slotted for a consultant, someone outside to come in and look at our salary schedules in totality and give us a recommendation on how to address the issues we're talking about, and try to provide, path forward on how to manage the salary schedules and targeting these areas where we have a hard time finding employees.
And I'll just say, one of the issues that I brought up during my budget meeting that would also be addressed in that is we have a lot of teachers or staff members who've been with this district for more than 20 years, and they get to the top of that salary schedule, and then there's nowhere to go. So that would also be part of this review, because we've tossed around in the past couple of years that issue. So that would be addressed in this as well, which I think is important to do.
Yeah, and we've looked at that a couple of times in the past, and going back, and I think, Ron, you were doing this job at the time, but I think the thought then was, how do we get people to the top quicker, so they collapsed the 5 steps down to step 20. But now we do hear a lot of what Ms. Horn's saying, which is folks who top out at step 20. I think in our teacher category alone, I think we have about 20% of our teacher base is at step 20 and above.
Yeah, so I think, I think they're feeling like they're being penalized,
Yeah.
and we certainly need, I think now more than ever, we need those mature teachers. So that's definitely a concern, just so that you guys know that I brought up, and I know other board members have as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I really support doing it too, because I feel like we anecdotally talk about all the time, like our surrounding counties, and we need to base it on factual information and be able to have a report that I think truly can tell us. And even if we can't get there right away, it's something that we can sort of aspire to and start working for, and actually have tangible numbers and stuff like that. But I agree because what I have a problem with right now in Knox County schools is we're almost encouraging our really good, experienced teachers to get out of the classroom and go into central office and things like that, because the only way they can increase their salary is to get out of the classroom, which we really don't. I mean, we want people who want to aspire to do that, but if it's only for money, we're losing some great people over salaries, and right now we don't need to lose our good teachers.
Yeah, I agree. I think we see that end of it. They need to make more money, so therefore they aspire to be something outside the classroom, which does hurt the students. And then we also historically have been a training ground for surrounding districts. That's another way to make more money. Is Knox County doesn't pay as well as Maryville or some other districts, so I'll spend a couple years here, get some experience, and then jump to a higher paying job there. So both of those need addressing. So jumping down to student transportation. So anytime we do a base salary schedule increase, we also try to add money to the bus contractor pay. And just for those of you who aren't aware of that, we don't hire our own bus drivers. We don't have our own school buses right now. We contract that out. So our way of trying to ensure that bus drivers receive additional pay is to put more money into the bus contracts. And I think that contract we increased by about $1.6 million for fiscal year 23. And then the health insurance contributions, we anticipate we're on the state's health insurance plan. We anticipate that increasing by about 6% for next year. And so when you price that out, it's going to cost the district about $3 million to maintain our current level that we cover for each employee. And I think on average, it's about 72% of each employee's health insurance that the district covers, depending on plan selection there. And then the last one we talked about at the budget voting meeting was it's extension of TCRS, which is state retirement for those classified employees. Historically, we've had any classified employee has been on our county's local retirement plan, which is what they call a defined contribution, which means it's defined how much you're going to contribute out of your paycheck each month or every couple of weeks, whereas the state has been more of a traditional pension type plan. Mr. Thomas talked about at the meeting about how this has been a goal of his for a long time to get classified employees on this plan as well, and the board agreed with this plan. And so just to kind of put it into perspective, we see it as a small cost to the district, but a big gain for our employees. It's for the next year budget, we're anticipating a little bit over $100,000 of an impact to the budget, which is not insignificant, but when you compare it to $590 million, it is. And then you look at what's going to happen for those employees. So if I'm hired as a TA next year, it can help recruit TAs to the classroom because if they may start as an educational assistant, they'll already be on the TCRS retirement plan. And so let's say after a couple of years as a TA, you decide to become a teacher, put the work in to become a certified teacher, you maintain your years of service and contributions in that same retirement plan. That's not the case currently, so they would have to change retirement plans. So see that as a win-win for the district.
Is there any discussion, especially in this 8% base salary schedule increase, for increasing salaries or payment for substitutes? Because I know we were hurting significantly for them as well.
That has been part of the conversation, and I don't have the scale right in front of me, and if you all are aware of our sub-schedule, it is quite a range of, depending on which day of the week you work, whether it be a Monday or a Friday, and which building you're working at. You can make decent money being a substitute, and I say that because a few years ago, when we changed to this plan, what we realized immediately was we lost a lot of educational assistants because they can make more money being a substitute. Now, the other thing, they didn't receive benefits, of course. But back to your point, that's not part of this projected budget. I think our hope is that as part of that salary schedule study we're doing, we hope to get some analysis on that.
But one thing that is part of the budget is adding a permanent substitute to each school. Okay. So that's part of the budget. And then secondly, according to Scott Bolton, we have more substitutes now than we did prior to 2020. But teachers are taking more unexpected leave and not putting their leave, like deciding on a Thursday to take Friday off. So there's not a lot of notice, which is creating gaps in the classroom. So it's kind of that's what I'm told is, there's a couple of things going on there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the compensation or benefit enhancements? So back to what I said earlier, those tie directly back to our strategic plan in terms of creating a positive culture. I think most employees would be happy with the 4% and the 8% and maintaining health insurance contributions, along with the other items. And it also, I think, goes directly to the survey where, one way to show teachers that you appreciate them is to maintain 4% or, where possible, more salary schedule increase. The thing I will touch on here, just thinking about inflation, and we all know that's an issue right now. We were asked in an earlier meeting, are you concerned about inflation? And there are some items in the budget that are directly tied to inflation, gas prices, building materials, things of that nature. But that is a concern going forward for salary schedule increases as well. And if you look back at the last 10 years of salary schedule increases the district has been able to put in place, the 3 of the last 4 years, the 4% is the first time we've done that as a district. Historically, and you all that have been around know that usually 3% is kind of the max you get. And some years it wasn't that. And in a lot of years, the certified would get 3%, classified 1.5%. So that is stabilized, and that's a good thing. We're meeting that MOU that we have. But the problem is if inflation's above 7% and you're giving a 4% raise, you're still going to get pushback from your employee base because they're losing money in that equation. So something for us to keep an eye on as we move forward.
While I'm out and about, I get questions, and they'll once they see this 591.5 million, they're going to say that's a lot of money. Yeah. It is a lot of money, but a lot of that money is going towards compensation.
It is.
Do you know what that number is? So when I say, yeah, but that 591 million, 400 and some odd million is going for benefits and compensation. Do you know what that number is?
I'll tell you the percent of, if you're just talking about the total $591.5 million, 83% of that number, and I don't have that number off the top of my head, but 83% of that number goes directly to salary and benefit. So significant number. We typically say, most of our expenses are in people because we are in the people business. Yeah.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah, hey, Randy.
Joe, you and Ron probably know I'm the type of guy that lays in bed at night and watches economic news and financial channels. A 9% growth in budget with a budget that derives a lot of its revenue from sales tax, which is a consumer-driven instrument. How much, I know in the past we've always been very conservative in how we approach this, but this is a large increase in a turbulent time. How much confidence do you have that projections will be able to meet numbers?
So I'll give you my few thoughts on it, and Ron, chime in here where you think. So it's a good question. It goes back to that 25% number I showed on the sales tax growth, budget to budget. So in looking at that, and I think this is through April's collections, sales tax for this current year, Chris Simons does both a 5-year trend analysis.
And Chris is really good, too.
He is, yeah. And an 8-year trend analysis. And so we take the average of those two and then meet with Caldwell and his team, and just to give it a sniff test, so to speak, to make sure we're going down the right path there. When you look at our current year collections through April, we're trending to collect about $216 million in sales taxes for the current fiscal year. And so if you take that number and look at what's in the budget for sales tax collections for next year, it's about $220. So the growth there, and if you take out the COVID year and look at the year-to-year actual collections prior to COVID, you're looking at 3 to 4% growth. So we feel like we're still pretty conservative based on what our actual collection is going to be this year and what we budgeted next year.
No, thanks, Joe. I'll chime in on that too. And also, I think we're trending a little higher on property tax too. If you look at the total, like just the total amount, so what we're projecting in total revenue this year, and again, there's some months left, so this is a projection. Where we think we'll land in total revenue, if you factor all of these things together, it's probably about a 2% increase. I'm going to use the word projected actual, if there is such a thing. Projected actual 22 versus budget 23, it's probably 2% or less. So we think it's still a pretty conservative budget.
Yeah, because the 9% is based on budget and not actual.
Right.
That's a good question.
I guess the thing I'm concerned about is we use a lot of trends and models, and we're in territory that's not trended and modeled.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. And so I think our work on that side, in addition to what Ron said earlier about TISA and trying to make sure we build capacity in the budget in terms of anticipating that large state growth and the out years of that, is also paying attention to this sales tax number. We're all cautious about that just because we know how things work. And to your point, no matter what the actual year looks like, that may drop off the face of the earth next month. We may be back at the drawing board. With that being said, I think we'd have to go back a few years to find a budget where and I hate to say this because I may jinx us here, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find a year where we budgeted a sales tax number that wasn't surpassed in actual collections. So I think we always try to be on the conservative side because we're all nervous about that number.
I just know this year with our budget has been a bit of a struggle because our revenue streams are different than yours.
Yeah, true. It's a good point.
Carson, that number with including taxes, employee taxes and benefits is $492.7 million. So it's 83.2% of our budget. That's what this says. And if you look at like areas of utilization, they give us all these cool little charts, which I really like. If you combine student instruction, school management and supports, student support services, instructional staff support, and curricular and student body support, that's 74% of the budget. And that doesn't include district office employees, which a lot of them are also out, in the schools, but it doesn't include them.
We got $100 million to run the rest of it.
Yeah,
Pay
so,
the light bill.
yeah, so facilities is only, less than 11% of the budget.
Education's a labor intensive.
It's labor intensive. So people that, and I remember, people that want to cut the budget, it's like, well, then you have to cut employees.
Yeah.
Because that's what we have. We're very, people intensive business. So that's where the money is.
Joe, I don't know if you wanted to, if you're through with this part of the presentation on the revenue and expense side of it, if you wanted to perhaps get into the capital budget, that might be a good segue into our next item.
Yeah. So I have a couple more slides, so let me finish those, and then Russ is actually the expert on the capital budget, so, and that segues, because I think he's doing the capacity presentation as well. So the rest of this slide, I'll say this ties back to, in our minds, to the classroom size equation we talked about earlier, which the community also indicated they value. This slide represents positions that were added in this budget, and there's really three main categories of that. Every year, once school starts, we always end up adding what we call unanticipated positions. No matter how much we try to anticipate and budget for those, there's always different segments of students that show up in different schools, or students requiring medical services that we didn't anticipate. So to carry those over into the next fiscal year, of course, has a cost with it. So that's the first item we see there. We did see a significant cost tied to the second one here, which was, if you remember, last year we started the 3 levels of virtual schools in the district, elementary, middle, and high. Initially, we were able to cover all that with ESSER funds, but once the state made those official schools and assigned a school code to those, we're required, as part of the general purpose budget, to staff those the same way we would a brick and mortar building. So because of that, we had to absorb several of those positions into the general purpose budget, and those are part of our continuing budget for next year. And the last one is where we talk, I think, with the committee about this in the past, our staffing allocation process in the spring. So as a result of the projected enrollment growth across the district at several schools, we add teachers, school administrators, and counselors. And so if you total those 3 items up, you're looking at about $8.75 million on top of the prior slide. And so we add just the staffing additions we make and the salary benefit enhancements. It's about a $34 million total investment of the 49.5 that we have as part of this budget, or about 70% if you put it into a percent. So Joni's going to talk about the departmental level slides for the next few minutes here, and then we can get Russ to talk about capital. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you. I'm going to talk to you about just the next couple of slides. We can go quickly if you want to also talk about capital. But so in this slide kind of encompasses our process that we go through every year when we start our budget build. Is we actually meet with all of the departments that have an account in our general purpose budget. We review their staffing with them and their below the line items, which are like their materials, their software, things like that. And we compile all their additional requests, and we put that before the superintendent and his team, as well as the Board of Ed, and that kind of becomes part of our budget proposal. So this one is $6 million, and it's basically the top bullet is our special ed and student support area. So we'll be adding 42 new positions in that, and that includes special ed instruction as well as support. Our welcome center for the community, there's a significant investment in that for more interpreters and services to help with the students and families that are non or limited English speaking. You hear us every year talk about how we have to add nursing positions for medically fragile students. So that's kind of that part is there's some expansion in there, like for pre-K, special ed pre-K programs, as well as enhancing programs that are already existing. And then you can see in the excuse me, in the parenthesis, every time we give a fairly large increase to our educational assistants, we also have to absorb some positions from federal funds into that, because the federal funds are limited, and so the salaries become larger for their budget, and then we have to absorb some positions. So that's the first bullet. The second bullet I refer to more as the area that deals with our social and emotional health of our students. So we're adding 18 new positions, 8 social workers, primarily at the secondary level to help with chronic absenteeism problems, 7 elementary school counselors, so that we're starting a multi-year plan to try to add additional staff in those areas every year so that we can lower our ratio between those positions and the students that they serve to provide better services for them. And then in school culture, we're adding 3 system-wide positions that will focus in on the whole child and be able to coordinate services in the district for kids that need extra services. The night alternative program, we're programming in some additional funds for that, and that basically helps students who've been expelled or suspended from their base school, helping with continuing their education until they're placed in one of our special day schools so that they don't experience any lapse in their education. And then the next bullet is we're making a significant investment in the music and performing arts area by reinstating as supervisor for the music and performing arts. Right now it's currently shared between that area and the fine arts program, so that area will have its own specialist to coordinate amongst the schools, as well as some additional money we programmed in to work on our band and choral supplements for staff that actually helps kids with band and choral programs. A library and media services specialist to help with schools that are underserved with librarians, which is really just our special day schools. We're starting to staff the new Northwest Elementary School. We're hiring a principal that will start in the fall for the entire year, just so that they can start building out their program and getting established in the community. And then halfway through the year, we'll hire the assistant principal so that they can start building their staff. And then the bottom level kind of takes into account all of the additional requests we received from those areas for materials, supplies, and some increases in software maintenance. So that's adds up to $6 million in that area. Any questions on that? Okay. The next slide is really what we refer to as our fixed increases. So we really don't have a choice but to program these into our budget, or we would not be able to do something we're required to do. So our increase, so it's $6.55 million amongst these four areas. It's debt service burden we're increasing in our general purpose budget. Our trustees commission, so as our revenues grow, so does our obligation to the amount that we have to pay to the trustees commission. So there was an increase in that area. As our per pupil expenditures increase, we also have to pass that on to the Emerald Charter School, so there was an increase in that amount. And then we also look every year for savings. So we're not just always spending, we also look for realized savings, kind of scrub through every line item in the budget, and there was some savings to be had in the district level insurances. We switched banks, so we were able to save on bank fees and our space costs for no longer being in the AJ building. So those were some areas that we saw some savings in. And then the final slide to share with you is what we grouped it into administrative and operational increases of 2.7. The largest part of that is the first bullet, which is a significant investment in our school security and safety. So we'll be hiring 20 new school security positions that will actually be out in the schools, a new investigator in that area, and then the software and supplies that go along with adding additional positions. And the next three bullets are positions for internal departments. So we're adding some new positions in technology to help with the one-to-one initiative. We're adding a new position in maintenance and operations for asset management, things like that, and a position in public affairs, as well as we just invested in a new communication for our students and families that we think will really reach them in a better way, and some coupon upgrades so that the schools will actually see the full $10 coupons book sales. So that's $2.7 million in our administrative and operational increases. And so if you add all those three slides I just talked through along with Joe's slides, that's $49.5 million increase in our expenditures. So you can see we presented to the board a couple weeks ago a balanced budget at this point. So that's where we are at this point. And so now we just have time if you guys have any other questions or anything you feel like we didn't cover.
Thank you, Joe and Joni. Appreciate that. Thanks so much. Russ, did you want to go to capital?
Not really, but no, seriously, you threw me a little bit of a curve because we weren't expecting to talk about capital today. So I can talk about it from a fairly high level and, try to answer any questions that you've got on that. But so I don't have any pictures to share with you on capital plan, but what I can tell you is that we have proposed a $48 million capital plan for next year, for FY23. That is part of a 5-year total plan. But the major expenses within that plan that people will see. We've got a lot of facility upgrade type projects in that plan, but the new facility construction that you're going to see is that plan includes, well, let me put my glasses on, I can tell you exactly here. That plan includes about $9 million for the last year of appropriation to the Northwest Elementary School project. It includes $4.6 million for the last year of appropriation to the Adrian Burnett Elementary School project. It also includes a $3 million appropriation, which is for the first year of a total $18 million project, 250 student expansion and remodel of Starkey Elementary School. And, you know, so that would get us through the design portion of that project. It also includes an additional $3 million for the design on a new Farragut elementary school, or a new elementary school in Farragut. You know, we call it the Farragut Elementary School, but I don't know what it's going to be called. So that would get us through the design portion of that project. And it also includes about $11 million for a 32 classroom addition to Hardin Valley Academy. And, you know, so, then, you know, so that doesn't add up to $48 million, but like I said, there are a number of other facility upgrades within that total budget. That $48 million is only $40 million in debt because we're going to apply $8 million worth of our, or $8 million from our fund balance to keep from incurring the entire $48 million as a debt load. So in general, that is the FY 23 capital plan. Are there specific issues or projects you're interested in?
No, I just wanted to get some clarity on Hardin Valley Academy, when that was going to start, and also the Farragut primary, intermediate, elementary, whatever it's going to be called. What is going to be the capacity of that school?
Let me go in order of what you asked. First, on Hardin Valley, right now we have a request for qualifications already drafted for architects, and when we do this, we put out a request for qualifications for multiple projects on the same RFQ. So we're RFQing Hardin Valley, we're RFQing Starkey, we're RFQing the Farragut Elementary School, and I think there's one other project on there that escapes me right now. So we're ready to go on that RFQ as soon as we get, you know, the final approval on the budget. So we'll put that out in probably June. The intent then is to get that back about August and get an architectural contract for each of these projects to the board and commission to consider, and then we'll start design. I think it is ambitious to say we'll start construction on the 32 classroom addition in the spring, but that's our goal, late spring, early summer, to start moving dirt on that one at Hardin Valley. So 32 classrooms at, something less than max capacity will, accommodate about 800 students there. On Farragut, we're looking to try to build a school that would accommodate about 1,200 students and would create a school zone that would pull about 450 or so out of Farragut Primary and Farragut Intermediate into the new school. We're still in the final stages of property procurement for that site as well. So we expect to have that wrapped up over the next several weeks and present a sales contract to the board for 25 acres of property to build that school on. So.
Yes, thank you, Russ. You know what question I'm going to ask. Knox County has put a grant program together, $400,000 for the schools. I would like to see the schools match that $400,000 for playground equipment. Commissioner Jays ran with this really well. We've been in South Knoxville raising, it's hard to believe the money that we have to raise for playground equipment. So we've already got $400,000 that it was approved 2 months ago, I think, Randy, last month or 2 months ago. So we're going to set up a committee to look at grants, dollar for dollar. It's going to be dollar for dollar grants. It's not going to be all free money. But it's beyond me that these small schools has to raise $75,000 for playground equipment, which is part of the child's well-being. They get out there and run and play and get tired, then they go back in and start studying again. So I'm requesting, and I'll request it next Monday, and I'll request it the next meeting after that, that we look at somehow funding at least half. Well, really, we need to fund all the playground because we just finished New Hopewell and Mount Olive and SKE 3 years ago, I believe. They're good for 20 years. We don't have to come back for 20 years. So that's my request.
Well, let me tell you where we are on playgrounds. Superintendent asked us to put together a program standard for playgrounds, and we finished a draft of that. It's on his desk right now. We anticipate presenting that to the Board of Education for them to consider in June. And if the board approves of that, then we will assess all of our existing playgrounds against that program standard. And that program standard would also include any newly constructed schools that we've got to provide them playgrounds. And then once we have the assessment, we'll have to go back and make or set some priorities against how we want to address any playgrounds that don't meet that standard. And you know, if the board approves that and approves the process, I think we'll be spending a whole lot more than $400,000 on playgrounds over the next several years.
We approved last month, I believe it was, $400,000 grant type funding for, it could be an outdoor classroom, it could be playground equipment, it could be for any type of thing that an elementary or high school, middle school would need, but it has to be a dollar for dollar match. So,
Okay, so I'm assuming that would be taken into account in what you're going to present to the board in June, so that.
that's totally different. That $400,000 is different from what they're going to present in June. That's $400,000 of, it all comes out of the same pot, but it's, this $400,000 will be coming out of the Knox County budget, not the school's budget.
But how would it be utilized, I guess, is my question.
Well, there's going to be a,
Oh,
Ron?
that's okay, Commissioner.
No, Ron, I'm sure Ron and Chris has been talking about it, so Ron, enlighten me, Ron.
No, you're correct. So there was a, and I guess you can call it an initiative approved, I think by the commission, I think it was last month, maybe. And so the county is offering, it's essentially a grant or grants up to $400,000. It could be a series of grants. So it's actually to help for situations like, let's say a school support organization has raised funds, right, for a particular project. And let's say that I'm making this up, but let's say the project, whatever that could be, it may not be playgrounds, it could be, you know, something to do with athletics, it could be anything. And they can apply. Let's say it's a $200,000 project. They've raised $100,000. They could apply for that grant. There would be a committee, I think, that would be established consisting of both county and school staff. And so then they would assess those applications and then reward accordingly. But again, it's a lot of it is to help communities that have partially raised dollars in order on a particular project, but they can't quite get there, so to speak. But it's not restricted to something like playground. Playgrounds could be in that, but it could be a number of things.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I have a couple of questions, and this wasn't my original question, but I guess I do have one now about that. So really, it sounds like what's going to happen is anybody that has a project, they're going to come to this grant process with half their money now. Is that sort of what it is? To me, it makes sense if you're a school, if you've got a project of $50,000, you're going to come to this grant saying, I've got 25 and try to get matching. Is that sort of how it works, or?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm used to the other mic.
I know.
If I was at one of my elementary schools, or any elementary school or whatever, if they need $50,000 before I apply for that grant, I would have the $25,000 on hand, ready to go.
Right, and I'll to segue off of what Commissioner Daly has said. There are requirements. So if let's say it's a structure of some sort on school property, regardless, whatever the project is, it would have to come back. It's built into the policy. It would have to be approved by the Board of Education, and would also have to be. It would have to adhere to the policies and procedures of the Knox County Board of Education.
And so the principals are already aware of this, or they will be soon?
Right. So I know some with kind of projects in the hopper, so to speak, are aware of it. But yeah, that's probably something. I'm not sure if communication has went out on that or not. Russ, do you remember?
Well, we haven't sent anything.
Okay. No, I know you're. Yeah. So I'll follow up with that though to make
thank
sure.
And the committee's not been set up yet either, so it was just approved last month, so there's still some steps to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and like Ron says, it's not limited purely to playgrounds. It could be any improvement project as I'm aware of it, and then anything that will have to be constructed, whether it's a playground or some other facility, will still have to go back through the board's vetting process to be approved before trigger can be pulled on it. Okay.
And then this is to continue on, I guess, we're talking about playgrounds and stuff, but I know a concern with all the schools all the time, and so I don't know if this is going to be part of the standards part, is the mulch requirement, because that also tends to always go back on the schools. And so is that being looked at with this program standards for playgrounds?
We've been working on that for several years, and we don't call it mulch, we call it engineered wood fiber.
Okay.
Because mulch is an agricultural product that has all sorts of stuff in it, but that's something that as a district we can spend several $100,000 a year on, and we have been budgeting $50,000 a year for us to help. We've been getting an additional $50,000 from the county on that, and we've been helping schools out with ground cover for the last several years. Under the program standard, we would have to pick all of that up. So that's what I'm saying. If the board adopts these program standards and wants us to move forward and assess our playgrounds against this, we're going to have to commit significant funds towards the maintenance of playgrounds.
Well, and I just think that needs to be considered, because it's great to have a playground, but if you can't use it because you don't have the correct mulch underneath it, it doesn't do us much good. So I just think it's a whole package. I think there are reasons probably why we got away from funding playgrounds. I don't think it's in it because anybody doesn't think they're valuable or see the benefit in them. But I'm sure at some point this decision was made and it's been continued. And a lot is it's money. It's very expensive, and
well,
yeah, so.
And if a decision was made, it's not recent.
Right.
You're talking a half a century or more.
Oh, well,
ago.
yeah. My kids are now in their 20s, and when I was fundraising for playgrounds when they were in kindergarten, so I know it goes back at least 20 years. But it's a huge financial consideration for the school system, and it's not the school system; it's the county too, because y'all are our funding body. So I think while we all I think we all support the playgrounds.
Right.
It is one of these things. If we're going to pay for it, where's the money coming from? Because the pot doesn't always get bigger. So that is one of these considerations. It's not that, Mr. J came and made the presentation, and I don't think anybody was against what he said, but it is one of those things. What do you not fund if you're funding playgrounds?
Right. I think that's a very good point. I mean, I think that if you ask every board member and every staff member, we would be all for funding all the playgrounds. But the problem is, well, then which pavement is not going to get replaced, and which roofs are not going to get replaced, and so that I'm sure that's probably where it came into play. So it's going to be expensive, and so then we have to look at does that go into the capital plan? Does it come out of the general purpose budget? Are we cutting positions? I think we agree that it needs to be done, but it's going to be substantial.
Yeah, and those are questions that we really have to develop some information before we can begin to answer.
Even defining what is a playground.
Yes.
And Russ, I think you know this. I think you may have shorted the years that we've gone back and we have worked on the fiber wood.
Yeah.
Because we started that with risk management and you guys years and years ago to help some of the schools that don't have the PTOs and the PTAs. But I think this would be a good time to give Adam Parsons some credit for all the work he does on your playgrounds and for all the effort he's put into developing this program that you're currently working on.
Yeah, Adam is our safety engineer, and he's done an exceptional job in creating a playground inspection process. We started out just trying to look at all of our playgrounds every 6 months, and I think we're doing it 4 times a year right now to inspect them for safety and to make repairs on that. And Adam's been instrumental in that. I think our maintenance department and grounds crew have really been helpful in that process too. We've got equipment that in some places you can't get parts for, and we've paid to have parts manufactured in order to put those pieces of equipment back into service again. So I think everybody's gone a long way on this. We'll see where we get to over the next several months, where we're going.
Any other questions? All right, so let's go ahead and move into school capacity.
And I've only got 65 slides on this, so no. But do you have something, Commissioner?
Russ, I wanted to discuss this because we often get into these discussions about capacity and how much capacity do we have. And, I've been on commission almost 8 years now, and it still troubles me in trying to understand it. It's a function of your actual building square footage, your classroom size, and the programming, educational programming that goes into it. You can have vastly different buildings that are laid out different with different programming and have almost the same capacity. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain that to me and to everybody else so that we could all understand that a little bit better.
I want to talk about it from the 30,000 foot level here and put some information out, but I included attached to your agenda is about a 65 slide presentation that was put together about 15 years ago by an architectural firm that gets really in depth about how to calculate school capacity and how the use of the school drives capacity and all that. So if you really want to get into the deep parts of it, that's a great presentation to look at, and it is. The concepts that are in that presentation are what we build our calculations off of. So let me start. School capacity sounds simple, and we've got an old saw that we use around the staff is like, just give me a number. Just tell me a number. And a lot of times it's not one number. It's like you said, it may be 5 or 6 or 10 numbers. It all depends on what question you're being asked and what problem you're trying to solve. And as you alluded to, capacity is not finite and capacity is not static. It changes with academic programming needs, and it changes with pupil-teacher ratios and how we staff schools. It's heavily affected by programs like choral music and PE, and even at the high school level, dual enrollment programs, and also our special education programs, which may see 3 or 4 students using a classroom that in other cases would be calculated with a capacity of 30. So that changes the capacity of the building there. The real foundation piece of calculating capacity is your student-teacher ratio. And you'll find as you look at our schools around the county, most of our schools have a much lower than pupil-teacher ratio than what is prescribed by the state. Some are much higher, or not much higher than prescribed by the state, but as close as they can be to what is prescribed by the state. And those are the ones where we are experiencing challenges right now, Hardin Valley and Farragut areas, and those particular concerns. A lot of people talk about fire codes and building codes when they're talking about building capacity, but those have no real effect on us because our facilities are built so that we will reach our educational capacity long before we reach the code capacity for any particular room or part of a facility. So there's a number of different types of capacity that we consider when we're looking at capacity of a building. Gross maximum capacity, we consider the number of classrooms in the building to include portable classrooms or temporary classrooms times the maximum pupil-teacher ratio. So I would have, if I have 50 classrooms in the building and the maximum pupil-teacher ratio for the grade level that this school's serving is 30, then I've got, 30 times 50 to give me my gross capacity for that building. The maximum capacity is basically the number of classrooms minus portable classrooms times the pupil-teacher ratio. Building capacity considers all of that, but it also gets into considering other portions of the facility, like your music rooms, your CDC rooms, your gymnasiums, and that helps build your capacity there too. Functional capacity is something that really pulls down your capacity of a building. And for example, at high schools, our functional capacity would be your building capacity times 0.75. It's 0.75 because we're on a block schedule, and teachers get a 1 period planning period every day, so that reduces your capacity in that building. But it also allows for the administrator to use that building in a different manner. If they want to pull their teachers out of their classroom during their planning period and say, hey, you got to go somewhere else and plan. I'm going to use your classroom for a class during your planning period. They can do that. And we have a lot that do that. And I can tell you that Hardin Valley Academy is doing that right now in order to make sure they've got capacity. But, so that's a pretty clear, functional capacity is pretty clear at the high school level. At the elementary and middle school level, we use a multiplier of 0.80, which gives you a little bit of freeboard in managing the building, so that when you're showing 100%, you've still got a little bit of breathing room in there, because you've reduced that by 0.80, a factor of 0.80. At the elementary school, we use 0.90 as that multiplying factor. The elementary schools are those schools that can probably be operated as close to their maximum capacity or gross maximum capacity as possible without having a terribly negative effect, because you don't rearrange your school every period. You don't change classes, and And, the classroom that had 30 kids in it last period has now got 19 in it. And, so the kids move in groups, they come in groups, and it's a much more simple problem to solve. Program capacity, this is where we get back to pupil-teacher ratio. It takes all of that, it takes that functional capacity, and it applies to it what the actual student-teacher ratio in that school is. So if you're, the high school that we've got that has the highest pupil-teacher ratio is 27-1, and that's Hardin Valley Academy. We have other schools, and I think Fulton and Austin East first come to mind, that have a 20-1 pupil-teacher ratio. Similar buildings, but because of that pupil-teacher ratio that you're assigning in those facilities, they're going to have similar capacities, or capacities that are within range of one another. And then the temporary capacity, in the last, program capacity and temporary capacity are the two that we're looking at most closely when we're looking at building management challenges. And temporary capacity takes all of the above, plus any other things that you may be doing inside the building to either create capacity or that would reduce capacity. If you're doing early classes at, for example, at the high school, 7 o'clock class, that adds capacity to the building. If you've got a significant dual enrollment program and you've got kids leaving campus to go to a community college or something during the day, that's, for all intents and purposes, adding capacity to your building so that you can serve a greater number of students with the same facility. So all of those things, all of that's a mouthful, but it's all calculations, and it's all just numbers. It's the school administrators that have to take all of that and turn it into something that looks reasonable on the ground. Again, I've alluded to some of this. In the real world, pupil-teacher ratios change from year to year and semester to semester based on class schedules, sometimes budgetary constraints, Board of Education, school system policy and practice, state instructional goals. What we have been told our maximum class sizes are. And the demographics of student population, whether it's high special education services population or even an English language learning population. They have different needs that affect the capacity of the facility, and then school administrators use their facility in different ways. Nature abhors a vacuum, and school administrators abhor an empty room. So you may wind up, committing to use a space for a non-educational purpose, for a while, and people start hollering about, well, I don't have space. And when you go look at it, so, well, you do. You just got to put these spaces back into instructional use rather than how you may be using it. I talked about classes outside normal bell times, and because a school has a physical capacity for all of this, the thing to learn out of it, in my mind, is that it doesn't necessarily equate to instructional capacity at that school. You may have, your physical capacity may give you 2,000 kids, but the ability to do 2,000 students. But once you put your instructional program into that building, you may only be able to serve 1,400. So that's, the challenge that we face with that. Does that sort of get to what you were thinking about? And that's why we have so much crying and gnashing of teeth about what capacity is, and why the capacity of this building was 2,000 last year, and it's 1,700 this year. And what changed? Well, the instructional programming changed. And we're maybe offering different things, or we've added some classes that have 15 kids in them instead of 30. You know, so it's could be a whole litany of different reasons. But all of that we take into consideration too, and we're going to be we've already done some of this on some of our projects, and you know, zone planning and development for our schools. And we've put together, well, let me walk through this real quick, and then I'll tell you where we are on some of our other projects. What we do, we work closely with the Knox Planning, previously the Knox County Metropolitan Planning Commission. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, if I could, before you move to this part of it. In design of schools, is there much flexibility that can be used to flex space for changing needs and programming capacity?
There is, and we try to build schools now that allow us to do that. We think the most flexible space you can have in a school is a standard 800 square foot classroom. And that's what we build most of our classrooms at now. They're 800 square feet plus or minus, depending on if it's an elementary school or a high school, but we're in that neighborhood. So we try to do that. We've got some schools around the county, or some facilities around the county, that were built with different designs back in the 70s and 80s that don't allow much flexibility at all. I think you've seen the existing Adrian Burnett Elementary School is one of those. We replaced a similar school with the new Cedar Bluff Elementary School about 10 years ago. Powell Middle School has some facilities that are the same way, that don't lend themselves. That the addition we did out there about 10 years ago helped alleviate some of that, but it didn't eliminate it. So we really try to keep away from special purpose type areas if we can. You can't avoid it in some cases. If you have to have a science lab, you have to have a science lab. You know, but if we can build a classroom and say, you use it as you need to or as you see fit, then we would prefer to do that. Like I said, we get projections from the Knox Planning on live bursts and building permits, and they take all of that and put that together, and they provide us annually a population forecast for each of our schools. And then we will go back and turn that into an enrollment forecast. And so what that does is we take what we know about our population that we have, and we apply it to the data that we get from the MPC. For example, we know that 20% of the kids in the Adrian Burnett zone that are zoned for Adrian Burnett don't go to Adrian Burnett, for a whole host of different reasons. You know, some is, you know, the convenience of parents and they want to do something else, or they have transferred to a school that's next door to where their parents work, or they're in homeschool or private school, or all of those answers. So when we're projecting enrollment, we try to take what our current enrollment trends are in all of our school districts and apply those to the numbers from the MPC, so that we're not over projecting or under projecting enrollment for those particular schools. The challenge in that is that people get to vote with their feet, and we don't always know how they're going to vote. Challenge with that too right now is, when people are immigrating to Knox County from other parts of the country or from other countries, we have nothing that we can go back and reach out and get a good projection on what that would be or what that looks like. Then we have to also, we use our capacity when doing zoning considerations as we look at the information that we've been provided. When we draw a zone, capacity is the first thing we look at. We look at transportation and how we're going to get kids to school within that zone. If the zone straddles a major terrain feature, river or a ridge line, that's a problem for us because in some cases you wind up having to drive 3 miles east so that you can go 2 miles west. You know, it depends on where you can get through the terrain feature. Railroad tracks are similar. That's a man-made feature, but it has the same effect to us as a mile-wide river because you can't cross it anywhere at certain particular points. But you can see 30 feet away where you want to go to. We have to look at parent responsibility zones, and, you know, as we're doing zoning considerations, we look at, as I said, the geographic and man-made obstacles. And if possible, we try to make sure that, you know, we keep our boundaries for the different schools congruent. That is a challenge because all of our schools have different capacities. Elementary schools, we have traditionally built smaller than we build middle schools and high schools. And so you're going to have multiple schools feeding in. The fact that we're still suffering from the fact that we are 2 combined school systems. You know, the way the county designed schools and built them for years and where they located them and how the city did it were not necessarily the same philosophy, but all of a sudden, one school system now has all of those schools to work with. And so we have middle schools that have 8 or 9 elementary schools that feed them. And that's not what we would like to do. And if you were to design it purposefully, you would not do that, but that's sort of what we have inherited. And since we use schools for 80 or 100 years, decisions that were made 100 years ago are affecting us today. And we have to live with that. And decisions that we're making right now are going to affect somebody else 50 or 100 years from now too. So that's the challenge with all that. Virginia, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a little bit with the zoning. And I mean, some areas of town are very nice, like South Knoxville, where there's very natural boundaries and, you know, everybody goes to the same middle school and then to the same high school, versus my area of town, which most people do. What I end up dealing with all the time, and I deal with it as a school board member and as a realtor, is there are like a pocket neighborhood that doesn't make sense. And I just wonder, do we ever think about, I mean, just even for my area of town, I can point out where those neighborhoods are, and I'm sure, you know, some of them that have the same issue, and it's probably more like Jennifer Owens' district, my district, and Daniel's that are more the center of the county that probably have more of the issues than a lot of the outlying areas do. But I do wonder if there's ever a chance to look at some of the logical neighborhoods that I know the whole neighborhood tends to ask for a transfer every single year, to kind of try to make sense of those, that we don't deal with it on a transfer basis all the time. And I know this is getting off of the conversation.
No, I think that's germane to the conversation. The answer is yes. You can certainly look at those. You know, every one of those when it was designed probably was not by happenstance. You know, you needed X number of students to move from one place to another, and that's how you got it. And, so, we can go back and look at that, revisit that. I know that we have done that a time or two, particularly, I think we cleaned up the Farragut zone a couple of years ago.
Yeah. That was one of the biggest things when I came on the board. That was an issue because when Hardin Valley was built, for that very reason, because Farragut was so overcrowded, Hardin Valley had plenty of space, so neighborhoods that were literally in the town of Farragut were zoned to Hardin Valley. Yeah. So it made no sense whatsoever.
I didn't remember as a realtor. That were like Salaries.
Like those folks that live in those neighborhoods, so that was, we had the advantage. We were already rezoning something. We were doing some sort of rezoning. I can't remember what we were doing.
We were rezoning for the middle schools.
For Hardin Valley Middle School, right.
Yep.
So when Hardin Valley Middle School opened, we used that opportunity to zone those neighborhoods that are in the town of Farragut back to Farragut because, like you said, And what kind of ended up happening there, 50%, we did a grandfathering, they could stay at either, which if they wanted to stay at Hardin Valley, 50% of the people that were zoned originally, Farragut neighborhoods that were zoned to Hardin Valley, 50% of them stayed at Hardin Valley, and then 50% of them came back. Meanwhile, we had plenty of space at Farragut and not enough space at Hardin Valley. So it was a good time to do it because, over time, things change. So it certainly was to our advantage to do it in that school. It was an advantage to Hardin Valley Academy and to Farragut.
I mean, the one I get in my district is Rocky Hill Elementary. It gets split for middle school, which is, it's fine if you split it once, but what happens is every single one of those kids that goes to West Valley, they all then, which most West Valley kids go to Bearden, all those Rocky Hill kids then get sent back to West. It's like you're disrupting a group of kids twice. Either they need to go to West Valley and go to Bearden, or they need to go to Bearden Middle and go to West. And it's just a...
And I understand that.
Yeah.
But I can also tell you that zoning and rezoning is the most painful thing that we will do. And even when you're trying to fix a problem, nobody's going to be happy with it.
Right.
And so that's why, me personally, I don't bring it up too often unless we have to.
Well, I just wondered if Brian Hartzell's office, when they look at every single year, everybody in this neighborhood asked for a train. I mean, and where I know it did happen, and I'm not even going to talk about that one as much. When my kids were at Bearden Middle, there was a neighborhood that was started at Amherst. Everybody from Amherst, I think, goes to Carnes Middle, except for this one neighborhood comes to Bearden Middle, and then that one neighborhood goes back to Carnes High School. And every year, literally, all those kids either ask for a transfer to West or Bearden High School.
And I mean, we
all
right.
know.
And I have a neighborhood that's same thing in the Fox Run area.
Well, I can tell you, we've got,
so.
I think it's, yeah.
If you take that one neighborhood and put those people back in that zone, that might be another neighborhood that you have to push to another zone.
But sometimes it's literally 8 kids a year. I mean, I cannot imagine. I mean, maybe it does throw off the balance that much, and but anyway,
I think your point is a good point. Just to ask Brian Hartzell, are there specific neighborhoods where literally everybody asks for a transfer? I mean, I don't know. It could be that you could do it and it wouldn't be painful because it's already what the community wants.
It's the ones that exist like that are around West High School and Bearden High School primarily, and there's a few of those.
Just for information purposes, I know that us four just went through redistricting, which we're required to do every 10 years. Does the state have a policy, or do you all have a policy when you visit redistricting and moving around? Is there any type of policy out there?
We have there's state statute that, applies to, to assigning students to schools. It's pretty broad and gives the board a lot of leeway in how they do it. There is no timeline consideration. It's mostly driven by whatever the specific need is, capacity of schools, or are you building a new school? And this fall, we're going to be going through and setting the zone for the new Northwest Elementary School. We've got a concept zone for that, and the concept zone was included in our capital plan about 3 years ago, so that we knew where we needed to go to buy property for that school to build that zone, and we'll wind up taking about 450 or 500 students out of the current Hardin Valley Elementary School, and probably about 400 out of Carnes Elementary School as well to go to this new school. You think everybody would be happy to go to a new school, but, I'm not looking forward to the process. Did that sort of get to what you wanted to talk about, or are there other things? I'll be happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Probably went a little beyond.
we're going to try to fix everything, right? Playgrounds.
But thank you, Russ. I think a lot of people, whenever they try to get their brain around capacity, they just think you've got this many square foot divided by kids.
Yeah.
And that's not really how it works at all.
That's not it, and everybody thinks that we're making excuses, you know, when we don't have a specific number, but that's not really it at all.
Well, and also a couple of other points. You know, I think people always want us to anticipate what's going to happen and build to that. First of all, we're not funded that way from the state, so we can't get funding for kids we don't have yet. So that's one thing. And then secondly, you know, we depend heavily on the Planning Commission to give us those numbers based on building permits that are pulled and that kind of thing. However, I think in my neck of the woods, it's anecdotally, it seems like we have folks that are moving in from out of town with lots of children, and they're displacing empty, you know, people that have not had children in their home for many, many years. So that is creating a difference, and you can't, like Russ said earlier, you can't predict what that is going to be. And that is making a difference in our neighborhoods. I'm sure all across the county. I see it in my area.
And anecdotally, I hear that and see that. We don't see it in the numbers yet.
Right, because we're actually decreasing our population.
And I think I gave everybody the worksheet on this a couple of months ago. I think somebody asked for it at a commission meeting, and we sent it over. But when you look at our enrollment on the first day of school this year, it was 59,500 plus or minus. We're at about 47,500 plus or minus right now.
57.
Or excuse me, 57,000. Yeah. Thank you, Virginia. 57,500. So we're down. We have trended down about 2,000 students over this school year. What do you attribute that to? Probably a lot of different things. I don't know what that is. I don't know how many students we've lost and picked up from that in that process. That's a whole dissertation in of itself that we haven't had the opportunity to examine closely yet. So, but I say it's not as bad as you would think it would be, because in that roughly 2,000 students, there's 500 early graduates that left us in January. So, the net number we're talking about is probably about 1,500.
I just want to say I agree with Susan. You know, I appreciate you doing this presentation, because one thing that I hear a lot in Hardin Valley with all the growth that we see is, well, you should build a school that anticipates the growth, you know, proactive versus reactive. So this kind of explains a little bit more to me. So I have that information to go back to my community, because that's one thing I hear a lot is, well, why didn't you build the school to accommodate 2,500 or whatever? So I appreciate this presentation and kind of the, behind it.
Well, thank you. And when we look out 5 years right now, we're looking at losing another, 1,400 students over that time period.
Because
primarily
the birth rate has
at
gone
middle
down.
school and high school.
Because of the birth rate?
And it's primarily because of the birth rate, because about 2008, our birth rate turned negative. It turned south on us. It went down. We're seeing that now at those levels, and probably the COVID turbulence masks.
Russ, MPC does a pretty good job with their projections and numbers. You and I have had this discussion before. I know you said this isn't showing patterns yet, but and you had mentioned people moving here, coming with we have no information on them. But I know in areas where I live, the area where I live, there is Cumberland Estates, West Haven, West Hills. These are places where 40 years ago, parents raised their kids. The type housing was one level. They stayed. They aged in place. And now there's a movement of younger families moving into these homes. And it's into areas, like West Haven, West Hills. Have you seen that kind of pattern?
Okay, hold on.
Did you turn me off? There we go. The answer is probably, but, you know, like I say, I don't have a demographics team. I mean, we put together an ad hoc group every time that we go through this process, and that's some information that I'm sure exists in our data that we need to spend some time pulling out over the next, you know, several months. But it's not a report that we can run. We'll have to go in and look at a number of different reports and try to extrapolate some information from it. But yeah, you're probably right. That would be a normal life cycle for a community.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, and I don't know if there's even a way, and you're a realtor, to work with KAR, because, I mean, I have said this in the last year with the way houses are, the only houses I see being sold are death, going to assisted living, which are both old folks moving out, divorce, or moving out of town. And so a large percentage of those houses are exactly what we're talking about. It's the older people, and I'm in one of those mature neighborhoods. And so I think Hardin Valley is a little different because it's new neighborhoods. You know, I think Farragut's a very mature neighborhood. Where I live is very mature neighborhood. I used to be the young person on my street. I am very much the old lady on my street now. It's all little kids and stuff like that. I used to not think that, but I do sometimes wonder if there is a way to do some tracking with KAR that, like, realtors would track, almost like you moved a house. I sold a house with no children, and I have a house that got bought with 3 children. I don't. It would have to be a kind of a cooperative thing working on it. But to me, those are the only people that really have those kind of stats. Like, I know, you know, how many kids are moving. You know, when I sell a house, how many kids, and I know the ages of them and that kind of stuff. But that's the only place I can really see to be able to track that well. And I know it's not being tracked now.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, we talk about partnering. You know, I love partnering with community. Yeah, I was going to say Hanson could get on that. Yeah, because we talk about partnering with, you know, educational partners, which I love doing on, you know, initiatives. But I think that's a great suggestion. So that way we can have planned growth and, you know, have these projected numbers. Or just a better data.
It doesn't help you with rentals, but I think, and especially some of our resale neighborhoods, I think it could. Well, even not even resale, and you know, you look at Hardin Valley. If you looked at whether it's a retiree couple moving in versus a young family, I mean, it would be interesting. And I mean, I'm on a committee with Hanson. I could actually see if there's a way that sort of realtors could start kind of tracking that. I mean,
it would be nice to have another data, have that data.
It really would.
It would
complement
help some of this other stuff. I don't know that it would be like a sole factor, but maybe could start tracking some of these sales.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you, Russ, very much. Yes, so in our other business, we have a meeting scheduled, I believe it's for July 20th. That's such a vacation time. I know I'm not here then. So is there anything the committee would like to see in July? If not, I would propose that we probably forego that meeting unless anybody has an objection to that. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So any other business for our committee? Well, friends, we've come to the end of our committee time together because this will be Virginia and Randy. Goodbye, adios. So thank you all so much for just, this is such an important committee. It really is. And I know a couple of years ago, we kind of I don't remember what year it was, but a couple of years ago, we kind of got away from meeting as a joint ed committee. And I really do think it made a negative impact in not meeting for those couple of years. So I really do appreciate everybody being here and engaging in this because this is just the kind of thing that really does help when it comes to budget time. And so thank you.
Well, I think just the school board getting to know county commissioners. I mean, I've been on this 3 times, and every time there's been a different set of county commissioners, and it's gotten me to be able to get to know them. And I feel like when we know y'all on a personal basis, it's such a better conversations we can have with y'all.
Yeah, so thank you. And I mean, I think I've been on it 3 times maybe. But as you guys, since you guys now have been on this committee, or as you hear other commissioners wonder or have questions about things, feel free to send Ms. Coatney just a quick little email and say, hey, consider this for a future presentation, because you'll think of things now that you've been on this committee that would be helpful. So please feel free to do that. You can reach out to me or Terry, or and just, as you think of things. Carson?
We had a wonderful workshop Monday night on the middle state of Knox County. A workshop with just us and commission and school board, where we just sat for 2-3 hours and just start talking. I mean, it doesn't have to be, me personally, don't have to be an agenda.
Just chat.
Let's just talk, and because I've learned a lot. What capacity, today's capacity, I learned a lot about capacity, how it's figured and everything, so I got a little knowledge on how that works now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the more communication that we have and the more understanding you have of our budget, I mean, it makes a huge difference for you to know that 83% of our budget is for salary and benefits and taxes. That's huge. So there you go. Yeah, if you have a question, we probably have somebody that has the answer. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We're adjourned.
Thank you.